My new book, Awake, Observe, Shape, Transform, is now available on Amazon, along with the 90-Day Transformation Journal. You'll find a link to these things in the episode description. Also, if you'd like to support this work, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers with no locked content, just a way to say I value this. You can also visit the site and check out the growing merch store, shirts, tanks, hats, and learn about one-on-one sessions with me by clicking the About button. And don't forget, the YouTube page has the podcast and binaural beats for meditation, rest, and sleep. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today is a deep cut episode. This one touches on psychic abilities, the paranormal, ufology, and the CIA. Today we are going to talk about one of many men and women who have helped the United States government use psychic abilities to spy on people. And this is not a Marvel movie, this isn't a conspiracy, this is something that actually happened, and it's still happening now. And one of the men at the center of it was named Ingo Douglas Swann. He's an artist, a mystic, a psychic, and most importantly, he's one of the architects of what we now call remote viewing. Remote viewing is, in its purest form, the ability to describe or give details about a distant or unseen target without the use of our physical senses or any obvious tools. In a time when we're barely able to trust our own intuition, there was a guy quietly drawing craters on the backside of the moon. And this was years before satellites confirmed that they were even there. And he was doing this under a contract with the CIA and the US military. This was legitimate, it was funded, it was documented, and eventually buried, until of course it was not. So we're going to break all of this down. Who was Ingo Swann? Why was the CIA hiring psychics? What did remote viewing actually produce? Like, what did it do for us? And how does all of this weird, wild story help you live a more spiritually connected life right now? Because if we're not grounding these topics in something usable, something transformative, then we're just consuming the paranormal for entertainment, and we have enough of that already. So let's get into it. The story of Ingo Swann, how one man's mind brought the paranormal into U.S. military intelligence. Ingo Swann was born in Telluride, Colorado in 1933. And like most people who end up doing incredibly strange things for the government, he wasn't exactly living a mainstream life. He studied art and biology at Westminster College and then joined the U.S. Army, where he served in the Far East and Korea for 3 years. He ended up working at the United Nations for 12 years, while also being involved in what he called experimental parapsychology. Basically, the dude was painting in New York City by day and experimenting with psychic abilities by night. He kept records, he was methodical, he was intense, and most importantly, he had results. It wasn't long before this caught the attention of real scientists like Dr. Hal Puthoff at Stanford Research Institute and eventually the CIA. Now, before we get into the mechanics of remote viewing, let's talk about why the CIA was even entertaining this idea in the first place. Because, yeah, I know it sounds out there, but this wasn't just some New Age experiment. This was a Cold War era intelligence project that was initiated out of genuine concern that the Soviets were gaining a strategic advantage using psychic warfare. Seriously, declassified CIA documents show that the Soviet Union was investing all these massive amounts of resources into researching ESP, psychotronics, telekinesis, what they called biocommunication. And in classic Cold War fashion, the U.S. government completely panicked, not because they believed it worked, but because they couldn't afford to assume that it didn't work, right? So anyway, that paranoia led to the formation of Project Scanate in the early 1970s. That was short for Scan by Coordinate, which would eventually evolve into a broader initiative named, they had several names. There was Grill Flame, Center Lane, and finally Stargate. Also, the reason these change names is because these projects get compromised and have to change the name. Famously, Stargate got exposed by President Jimmy Carter on television. He was holding their file in his arm on television, and it said Stargate on it. So, good job, Jimmy. But he was shocked because he used Project Stargate to find a downed airplane military craft in Africa. So he was a believer after that. Anyway, so about this time, enter Ingo Swann. In 1972, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ were introduced to Ingo at a New York City party, which is exactly where you'd meet a gay psychic artist that was in the military. Ingo was invited to Stanford Research Institute, SRI, in Menlo Park, California, to demonstrate his psychic abilities, and they wanted to do it under controlled circumstances. This is where it gets a little wild. They didn't just ask him to describe places. They wanted to see if consciousness could interact with physical systems. So they set up an experiment where a magnetometer, essentially a device that measures changes in magnetic fields, was sealed inside of a vacuum chamber and placed in a secure, shielded room. It was entirely inaccessible. Swann was in a separate room, and he focused his awareness on the magnetometer, and almost immediately the readings on the instrument spiked. They spiked repeatedly. He was affecting the magnetic field of a shielded object without ever touching it in the same room. This wasn't describing a location. This was psychokinesis, the ability of the mind to affect matter. And it was witnessed, documented, and published in scientific journals. The physicist in charge was Dr. Hal Puthoff, later admitted that, that this was a turning point for him, right? That they realized that they weren't just dealing with parlor tricks or subjective impressions. They were looking at a form of consciousness that could interact with the material world across time and space. To be fair, Joe McMoneagle, Psychic Spy 101, the first one for the U.S. government, he talks about this a lot, and he said, the experiment was remarkable, but essentially you couldn't know completely that it wasn't being fucked with by outside forces. I know one interview he mentions like a train can go by and fuck it up. So he's like, it was impressive, but they weren't totally sure. They had other more legitimate proof. But that's when DARPA and the CIA took it serious, right? Because if you've got a guy, right, who can mentally interact with a sealed instrument, and he's not the only one, then this might, what else could they do, right? And how the government loves to, weaponize everything. And not to jump around too much, but it's always fun to throw out a weird, random thing that will send some of you down a rabbit hole. But look into the government kidnapping children in other countries for their psychic abilities. I probably sound like a crazy person, but it really ramped up when they realized that they could use psychic abilities to summon UAP and cause them to land. So they call it psionics. They call the people psionics. So they found that there are traits in some humans that make them more likely to have these abilities. So take a look at it. Anyway, so Ingo Swann helped to design what we now call the Coordinate Remote Viewing, CRV, system. It's essentially a protocol that removes the guesswork and the magic or woo-woo from the whole thing. You sit down, they give you a set of random numbers that correspond to a specific location, and without knowing anything about that location, you describe it. You sketch it, you feel it, you smell it, whatever, and the results were often accurate enough to keep the program going today. It's still happening. So this wasn't just a theory. The people were locating military installations in Russia, hidden planes, lost submarines, kidnapping victims, and they were using their minds. Now, I know the word psychic makes a lot of people check out. It's even, it's been co-opted, right, by scam artists and spiritual con women. But that's not what this is. This isn't a crystal ball on a velvet table. It was, or is, government-funded, peer-reviewed, and repeatable under strict controls. And Ingo wasn't claiming that he was special, right? He just believed and taught that anyone could learn to do this. He would say that consciousness wasn't limited to the skull, right? That we are non-local beings capable of perceiving across space and time. So physicist Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, again, Psychic Spies on Prime, watch it. But they were the backbone of this research at Stanford, and they were kind of the perfect pair, open-minded but scientifically trained. Puthoff had worked on lasers and quantum electronics. Russell Targ was a laser physicist as well. But they weren't people that took things lightly. They saw the results, right? And they believed. Still, in the CIA, it was a mixed bag. Some people were intrigued, some people were threatened, some people mocked it. But when the results started to pile up, and some of those results actually turned into useful military intelligence, they couldn't ignore it anymore. And like anything the government touches, it eventually got buried, restructured, and pushed underground. The program was quote unquote shut down in the 1990s, but you and I both know that's not the full story. You'll spend millions of dollars developing a system that works just to throw it in the trash. And what we know about the government's use of psionics, well, I mean, that means that they're clearly still using it today, right? They're working with this ability that, might be latent in most, but it's obviously working in some folks. So we're going to talk about that. So we look up what I said before about psionics. It's worth checking out. It's clearly something they're still doing. So you may have heard about, not to harp on this too much, but there's these recent claims in the UFO disclosure world where people are not just seeing UFOs, but they're able to summon them through conscious intent. For more on that, check out anything involving Dr. Stephen Greer, whistleblower Jake Barber, or a thing called Skywatch. Very interesting shit. But, even former military officers, Dr. Garen Nolan, folks involved with programs like ATIP have hinted at the possibility that consciousness itself plays a role in the contact experience. And on behalf of the folks like me that have been playing in this world our entire lives, we'll just say, duh, no shit. This is exactly what people that they blew off years ago have been saying. And you see, for those of you that aren't fanatical, crazy people like yours truly, ufology has gone through a lot of changes over the years. But there's always been a divide between the consciousness people and the nuts and bolts people, right? The science people and the woo-woo people. And I think it's only fair to say that recently we've seen that it's probably both. In fact, Ingo Swann himself believes that this phenomena has something to do with consciousness. He wrote a book called Penetration, which I don't know why it's funny to me. But when he described, he talks about seeing crazy shit, humanoid beings on the moon. He's also implied that our psychic abilities were being monitored and possibly limited by something or someone. And we can easily make a jump from there into cell technology and Wi-Fi. But I'm not here to tell you whether that's true or not. What I am here to say is that people at the top, people in defense and intelligence, are now deeply interested. And they're openly discussing consciousness as a means of perceiving or even interacting with non-human intelligences. So this is not fringe anymore. So let me bring this back to us, because I don't want this to be just another, whoa, that's crazy episode. So here's why this matters. Every power structure of your life has told you that your awareness is local, right? That your mind is your brain, and your brain is a meat computer running on electricity, and that's it. But people like Ingo Swann and the governments who have studied him, they disagree. And not just in theory, they've proved it repeatedly. This isn't a joke anymore. There's a lot out there on this topic, and it all leads us out of the body, This is what our last week's subject, Aldous Huxley, was saying all along, that mind, consciousness, none of it is attached to the body, nor is being generated by the body, which is what every spiritual and religious system ever has been saying since time immemorial. You are not bound by the five senses. You are not bound to the past. You are not bound to your circumstances. You are, or what you are, is consciousness, awareness. And you, the real you, are not stuck in time and space. And when you begin to meditate, not as a hobby, but as a way of being, you start to see this for yourself. You begin to notice these subtle impressions, the non-local information, the deep intuitive hits that seem to come from nowhere. You stop thinking of yourself as a brain and start remembering that you are something far bigger. Now, if you're interested in exploring this, which you probably are, you don't have to wait for CIA clearance. There are beginner methods that you can try today, right? Here's a simple exercise. Have a friend choose a photo out of a magazine or something, fold it up, put it in an envelope, and without knowing what it is, sit with it. Quiet your mind. Don't think, feel. And don't not accept certain impressions, right? Jot down the impressions. Do you feel water? Does it feel like land? Does it feel warm? Does it feel cold? Are they structures, people? Now sketch something, shapes, movement, colors. Don't judge it, just go with it. You're going to want to judge it, but just don't. But when you're done, open the envelope and compare. Don't be discouraged if it's not perfect. You're not trying to guess. You're learning to feel through consciousness without relying on the senses. And over time, you'll start to pick up more detail. You'll surprise yourself. And whether or not you ever become a remote viewer, the point is you're stretching your mind. You're stepping into your own deeper power. You're remembering what you really are. Now, an exercise that I think helps is to sit quietly. And those of you that have done meditation with me on Sundays may remember this, but lay your hands on your thighs or wherever, but you're going to feel inside of your hands, inside of your fingers. I don't mean what's in your hands. I mean your insides. Get very quiet, get still, and just feel. It may feel warm. It may feel like it's pulsating. But the level of stillness that's required to feel that is an invaluable resource. Now, when you start to feel it in your hands, try to move it up your arms. Notice if it moves. It's about becoming aware of the feelings in your body. And I don't mean the feelings that the mind creates. I mean the feeling of being in a body. I find that this little exercise here helps people with the perspective of being inside of the body and working through the human form, using it. Not just have fun with it, right? But to use it. Don't treat it like a game. Just do it and see what happens. But feel. You got to feel the insides of your hands. So anyway, Ingo Swann wasn't trying to be famous. He wasn't trying to sell spirituality. He was just exploring the outer edge of what it means to be human. And he was brave enough to do it in the middle of a system that didn't know what to even do with him, right? There's a lesson in that. The real mystical life is not clean. It's not tidy. It's definitely not always accepted, but it's real. I love you. Stay awake. Thank you. If the infinite spark of being has brought you any value, consider supporting the work. And you can do that by checking out Awake and the 90-Day Transformation Journal, both now available on Amazon. The links are in the description. If you want to support this work on a monthly basis, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers that have no locked content yet, just support. You can also swing by the website, check out the merch store, learn more about working with me one-on-one, and as always, the YouTube page has full episodes as well as binaural beats to help you with your practice. So I'll see you next week. Thank you, and I love you.